I will be discussing the developmental growth of infants or newborns. So my reasoning for choosing this age group was because I find it really interesting how quickly a child develops in this portion of their lives. They go through an incredible amount of physical, social, and cognitive changes, and it's also the beginning of their life, so it's interesting to see how it all starts out. So the first one that we'll be talking about is physical developments. So growth is quicker in infancy than any other point in a person's life. Normally, an infant will double their birth weight by 3 months and triple it by a year old. The rate of growth is so fast that if you were to continue at this speed, a 10-year-old would be the size of a jumbo jet. At around 2 months of age, approximately 40% of an infant's energy is dedicated to growth. Most of the remaining energy supports essential functions like breathing and digestion, while only a small amount goes towards physical activities. Since growth demands such a high level of energy, infants need to take in about 50 calories for every pound they weigh, significantly more than the 15 to 20 calories per pound typically required by adults. Breastfeeding is also generally considered the most effective way to meet these nutritional needs. By the age of 2, a child's growth begins to slow down, which means they require less food. This stage is also when many young children start to become selective about what they eat. Food they once seemed to enjoy suddenly seems gross or unappealing. While this picky behavior can be frustrating for parents, it may actually serve as a protective purpose for toddlers who are gaining independence. As children explore more and are exposed to a wider variety of foods, turning down unfamiliar items may help prevent them from consuming something harmful. Parents shouldn't be overly worried about the selective eating phase. Even though children may eat fewer calories per pound than before, most still get the nutrients they need to grow properly. However, there are various strategies parents can try to help promote healthier eating habits during this time if they're really concerned. Alright, now we're going to look at social emotional development. Okay, so as infants develop physically, gain motor skills, and improve their perception, they gradually expand their understanding of the world around them. During this process, both infants and toddlers start to recognize that they are separate individuals from the people and the objects in their surroundings, and they begin to understand that they continue to exist over time. Determining exactly when this sense of awareness emerges can be challenging. After all, we can't expect a 3-year-old to clearly explain when they first realized they were a separate being and not just part of the surroundings. Researchers must use more indirect methods, and one common tool is a mirror. In a typical experiment, a red mark is placed on the baby's nose before placing them in front of a mirror. 1-year-olds often reach towards the reflection, indicating that they notice something unusual on the mirrored face. But by around 15 months, babies begin to touch their own nose when they see the red mark, showing that they recognize the reflection as themselves. By the time they reach 2 years old, almost all will respond this way. This behavior suggests that they now understand the image in the mirror is a reflection of themselves. Additional aspects of a young child's behavior indicate that self-awareness typically develops around 18 to 24 months of age. Around this time, toddlers tend to focus more on pictures of themselves than on images of other children. They also begin using their own names or personal pronouns like I and me, and many can identify their age and gender. These milestones often appear together, pointing to the fact that by age 2, most children will have a solid sense of self. However, the pace at which this development can vary. It often It's often quicker in cultures that promote independence in toddlers. As children develop a deeper understanding of themselves as thinking individuals, they also begin to recognize that others have their own thoughts, beliefs, and intentions. They start to grasp that these mental states often drive people's actions. Remarkably, even infants show an understanding that behavior is often purposeful and aimed at achieving a specific goal. For example, consider a father who says, "Where are the crackers?" while his 1-year-old daughter watches. He opens the kitchen cabinets and moves items around in search of crackers. When he finds them, he exclaims, "There they are!" An infant who understands intentional behavior would be able to connect her father's actions, searching and moving objects, with his goal of locating the crackers. Numerous insightful studies have shown that even 1-year-old infants grasp the concept of intentionality. In one experiment, an infant watches a woman who repeatedly shows interest in one of 2 stuffed animals. She gazes at it attentively and appeared pleased. Later, she reaches for either the toy she had shown interest in or the one she had previously ignored. By the time infants were 12 months old, they showed surprise when the woman chose the toy she had previously ignored. This reaction suggests that the infants had interpreted her earlier behavior, her focused attention and positive expression, as indicating an intention to pick up a specific toy, and were puzzled whenever her actions contradicted their expectation. While the early development of a child's theory of mind is fairly well understood, the exact mechanisms behind it are still debated. One perspective highlights the role of language, which advances quickly during the same period when theory of mind begins to take shape. Some researchers suggest that improvements in language abilities support the development of theory of mind, possibly due to an expanding vocabulary that includes verbs related to mental processes, such as think, know, and believe, or argue that the key may lie in children's growing command of grammatical structure that allow them to describe situations in which one person holds a false belief about another's knowledge or intentions. Another perspective suggests that a child's theory of mind develops through social interactions. Children acquire knowledge about mental states by engaging with others. Put simply, when children are involved in discussions about others' emotions, feelings, and intentions, they come to understand that people's actions are driven by their beliefs, even if those beliefs are incorrect. Alright, and lastly, we're going to look at cognitive development. So the first part of this section we're going to look at is locomotion. So in this one, in just over a year, significant progress in posture and movement changes in infants' abilities. Around 5 months old, most babies have rolled from their back to their front and can sit upright with some support. By 7 months, they are usually able to sit independently, and by 10 months, many can creep. A typical 14-month-old can briefly stand on their own and walk with help. This early unsteady walking is known as toddling, which is where the term toddler comes from. Naturally, children begin walking at different ages. Some take their first steps before turning 1, while others may not be able to walk until 18 or 19 months. By the time they reach 24 months, most toddlers can climb stairs, walk backwards, and kick a ball. Posture and balance. Okay. The ability to hold an upright posture is essential for walking. However, newborns and young infants find maintaining an upright position nearly impossible because their bodies are top-heavy. When they begin to lose their balance, they quickly fall over. It is only as their legs and muscles develop that infants can sustain an upright stance. Once infants are able to stand, they adjust their posture to prevent falling, usually using visual information to help stay balanced. But balance isn't something infants master in just once. Instead, they have to relearn how to balance for each new posture, whether sitting, crawling, or walking. This is because the body pivots around different points depending on their posture, such as wrists for crawling or ankles for walking. And distinct muscle groups must be engaged to correct any loss of balance. For this reason, it's common for infants who can sit steadily to repeatedly fall while crawling. Moreover, after they start walking, infants must adapt to their posture again when carrying objects, since their balance changes. Essentially, infants continually recalibrate their balance systems with every new posture, much like how basketball players adjust when their muscle control when switching from dunking to shooting three-pointers. Alright, the next one is stepping. Another key aspect of walking involves moving the legs in an alternating pattern, shifting the body weight repeatedly from one foot to the other. Children generally don't begin stepping on their own until around 10 months, as the ability to stand is a prerequisite for stepping. However, when 6 and 7-month-old infants are supported upright on a treadmill, many exhibit the mature alternating step pattern with each leg. This suggests that infants possess the ability to perform the alternating leg movements necessary for walking even before they can walk independently. Still, walking without assistance requires mastering additional skills beyond this basic motion. Alright, now we're going to look at environmental cues. Many infants first learn to walk in the relative safety of flat, clear floors at home. However, they quickly encounter a variety of surfaces, some more suitable for walking than others. Infants rely on environmental cues to determine if a surface is safe to walk on. For instance, they are more willing to walk across a bridge if it is wide and has a sturdy handrail than one that is narrow and has a shaky one. When descending stairs, novice walkers often continue even if a step is too high and end up falling, whereas experienced walkers either stop or slide down safely on their backs. Only those with more experience can recognize which steps are safe to navigate. Additionally, skilled walkers respond to social cues from parents, such as encouragement or warnings, but mainly when they are unconcerned about the safety of the they're uncertain about the safety of the surface themselves. These findings demonstrate that infants actively use environmental information to judge whether a surface is appropriate for walking. Alright, and lastly, we're going to look at reaching and grasping. By around 4 months of age, infants are able to successfully reach for objects. These early attempts often appear awkward because infants don't yet move their arm and hand smoothly towards the target. Instead, their hand follows a zigzag trajectory, moving a short distance, slowing down, then adjusting direction slightly, repeating this pattern until they finally touch the object. As infants develop, their reaching movement becomes more efficient with fewer adjustments, although they still lack the smoothness and continuity seen in older children and adults. As infants gain better control over each hand, they also develop improved coordination between the two hands. While 4-month-olds often use both hands, their movements are uncoordinated, with each hand acting independently. For example, an infant might hold a toy still in one hand while shaking a rattle in the other. By around 5 or 6 months, infants begin to coordinate their hand movements so that each hand performs different actions that work towards the same goal. For instance, a child might grab a toy animal with one hand and stroke it with the other. These abilities continue to advance beyond their first birthday. By 1 year old, children typically reach for most objects using one hand, and by age 2, they use one or both hands as needed, depending on if depending on the object size. The gradual development of fine motor skills is clearly seen in how children learn to feed themselves. Around 6 months of age, many infants begin experimenting with finger foods, like sliced bananas and green beans. While they can easily grasp these foods, getting them into their mouths often proves challenging. The hand holding the food might be brought to the cheek, then moved to the edge of the lips, and finally pushed in the mouth. Mission accomplished, but only after several detours. Nonetheless, infants' eye-hand coordination improves quickly, allowing them to place the foods of different size, shapes, and textures directly into their mouths in much more efficient ways. Alright, well, I think that is going to be it for my presentation, and then this is my reference page. All I used was the textbook. Thank you.